Bangladesh Bank Cyber Heist by Timothy Navarro. So, a brief introduction. The Bangladesh Bank Cyber Heist was an ambitious plan to steal close to $1 billion from the nation of Bangladesh. Now, it was pretty ambitious because they were trying to hack SWIFT, which is an international banking system standard that, prior to the attack, was thought to be virtually impenetrable. This attack was pretty meticulously designed. Planning and execution began 9 months before the actual attack occurred, and it occurred on a large international scale, involving countries from Asia, Europe, and North America. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this attack was mostly prevented. However, monetary losses did total to $81 million. Now, some motivations on why we should study this attack. It really highlights the flaws into the unhackable banking system of SWIFT. And we're going to get more into SWIFT in the first background slide coming up. However, another motivation is the design of the attack vector is truly an excellent case study for cybersecurity students to study. The attack occurred on such a large and international scale, and so it required the organizers to really utilize their knowledge of culture and customs to their advantage to try and find vulnerabilities to this otherwise unhackable banking system. So now, what is SWIFT? SWIFT stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, and it's a consortium that operates a trusted and closed computer network for communication between member banks across the world. It's considered to be the gold standard in international banking, touting military-grade security, and it utilizes public key infrastructure to verify communications between banks. So how does it work? Essentially, a member bank accesses the network and sends a request to another member bank. This network is closed, highly protected by member institutions, and requires legitimate credentials from authorized bank employees. SWIFT requests cannot be reversed, however. These are only payment orders and not the actual money transfer itself. Essentially, the network facilitates payment order confirmations between banks, which banks then act on received confirmations and process these orders within the banks. Because SWIFT is a closed network and thought to be impenetrable, banks can fully trust any payment order they receive on the system to be authentic and genuine and tend to act on those orders instantaneously. Now, to really understand the nuances behind the attack vector, we have to really understand the cultural and political background of the areas that were affected. And so, looking at Bangladesh, they are a Muslim majority country which observes the working weekend on Friday and Saturday, as opposed to Saturday and Sunday here in the States. And they're also an underdeveloped country. They don't really have the same resources that most developed countries do to protect the cyber infrastructure of their banks. Likewise, in the Philippines, they're also an underdeveloped country with less resources. And an important thing to keep in mind in the context of this attack vector is that this country observes Chinese New Year as a non working holiday. They also have a casino system that has no anti money laundering laws. Therefore, it's pretty easy to take large sums of money to these casinos to have it exchanged out for untraceable cold hard cash. And finally, New York City. It is the financial capital of the world, and it has an automated system to flag SWIFT transactions for manual review in the case of US sanctions. Now, this becomes important because New York City, being the financial capital of the world, has many different systems to protect the institution. But the main important one, important to the context of the story, is this system that flags the transactions in the case of US sanctions. Moving on to the attack vector, you could really divide it up into three phases: preparatory, execution, and cover up. In the first phase, bank accounts all across Asia were set up, ranging from countries like Sri Lanka, the Philippines, Vietnam. These bank accounts were often made under false identities with fake driver's license. However, relaxed security in underdeveloped countries allowed these accounts to be opened and to be maintained. At the same time, the Bangladesh Central Bank unknowingly becomes affected by malware. An employee was targeted by an email phishing scam, which unknowingly granted access to the entire Bangladesh Bank internal network. Now that the network has been infected with the malware, the hackers can then monitor the Bangladesh bank on the inside. With access, these hackers spied on workers' habits and behaviors and also gained sought after credentials needed to access the SWIFT system. Moving on to phase two, the execution. Thursday afternoon, hackers send out SWIFT requests from Bangladesh to New York. Essentially, it's a Thursday afternoon, so the Bangladesh bankers are getting ready for their weekend and shutting down the bank. And at this moment, the intruders enter the SWIFT system using the credentials that they obtained from observing Bangladeshi bankers at this point and begin sending out SWIFT requests to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Now, these requests detailed money to be transferred from the nation of Bangladesh's reserves stored in New York to various accounts across Asia, and a total of 35 requests was made, totaling $1 billion. Now, on Friday, New York receives these SWIFT requests. They complete 5 of the requests, totaling $81 million. However, their automated flagging system flags the remaining 30 requests out of sheer coincidence. Recent US sanctions against Iran forced a shipping company onto a US blacklist, not to be done business with. This shipping company coincidentally shared a name with parts of the 30 requests. There is no relation whatsoever, merely a coincidence. However, because of this coincidence, the system in New York flagged 30 of these requests for manual review, and they were not executed. Now, moving on to phase three, what would be the cover up. On Sunday, the Bangladesh bank employees returned from their weekend and realized what had happened. They tried to send Swift stop requests to New York to try and mitigate the damage. However, because New York observes their working weekend on Saturday and Sunday, these requests would not reach them by the time the money transfers would have processed. However, because the New York automated system flagged 30 of these requests, they were just sitting there for manual review. So on Monday, when the New York bank employees returned back from their weekend, they received the stop requests and canceled the 30 transactions sent for manual review. On the flip side, however, the 5 requests that do make it out end up going to Philippine banks. And on Monday, that Monday, just so happened to be Chinese New Year in the Philippines. Therefore, the bankers were not there to receive the stop requests, and this allows the money transfer from New York to Manila to go through. Hackers withdrew the $81 million stolen and laundered the money through the Manila casino system to convert to untraceable cash. Now, the aftermath. $81 million has not yet been recovered by Bangladesh, an underdeveloped country that severely needs the funds. This attack also really rethinks the impregnability of Swift. I mean, it shows that the Swift system is so vulnerable, with the main targets of vulnerability being at the endpoints of the communication system, where obtaining private keys can lead to full access. It really shows the need for underdeveloped countries to bolster their cybersecurity, as any weak link in this globalized chain can cause a major disruption in international finance. Now, there are potential North Korean implications as well. The malware used to gain access to the Bangladesh bank contained traces of North Korean involvement, from IP addresses found in the malware that are tied to the North Korean country, as well as traces of Korean language found within the code itself. If this turned out to be true, it would be the first ever attempt by a nation state to commit a financial crime. Technology, like art, is a soaring exercise of the human imagination. Now, that is a quote by Daniel Bell, and I think it really sums up the story of this bank heist. The Bangladesh bank cyber heist is an excellent case study on the ramifications of a rapidly industrializing, technically dependent, and extremely interconnected world. Institutions are built up to facilitate this globalization and then blindly trusted to be secure. The architects of this cyber attack took careful consideration to the plan, targeting underdeveloped countries in Asia who lack the fortress like defenses of the likes of New York City. The plans were meticulously crafted around the cultural norms of each area of the attack and executed in a way that would not be reversible, had a mere coincidence in United States politics not gotten in the way. This attack itself still caused much harm to Bangladesh, both financially and in terms of the reputation of the country on a global scale. Much was learned from the attack, however. While the Swift network is still effectively impenetrable from brute force cyber attack, the endpoints are still vulnerable. Banks must take extra precaution in securing their private keys into the network, as this attack shows how potentially dangerous an attack in this manner could be. And I leave you with two questions. Without the proper research and knowledge of the cultural norms of each targeted area, do you believe the hackers would still have been successful? And do you think there are any truly impenetrable cybersecurity defense systems? Thank you.